Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Ralph Schultz, and I'm broadcasting on my YouTube station from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I just moved here from Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I had been doing all my other broadcasts. The, so, what I want to talk about today is just the setting behind the scenes of the situation between Ukraine and Russia and the conflict. The Take a look at this map, which is in my book. Um, it's the 1914 map of Imperial Russia and Eastern Europe, and which it was the extent of the Russian Empire at the time. You can see this is the western half from the Ural Mountains, and you can see it is enormous. And had the Russia had the largest standing army in Europe, believe it or not, at the time in 1914, before World War I started. Um, map not only shows the geopolitical borders, but it conveys a sense of Russian power, glory, respect, and dominance. Okay, just take a quick look at this map for a moment again. Okay, that's how 25% of the Russian current population views their country today. Um, Not the actual borders, but the feeling of what it means, the intangible, enduring characteristics of Mother Russia going back to 1600 Tsarist Russia. And Europeans, believe it or not, also look at this map and see and envision Russia exactly the same way, but as an expanding, enormous, powerful nation dominating and threatening Europe. Neither point of view reflects the current reality, but it is influencing NATO and Russian policies and military strategies. So, Sweden and Finland joined NATO due to fears of Russian expansion. Ukraine turns to the West for protection, and Russia expands outward to provide a buffer for Mother Russia, the concept of Mother Russia, and spread Russian culture and influence. They say today about 20% of the Russians back an extremist policy of Russian imperial expansion and absorption of Ukraine. About 65% of the population is basically indifferent to politics. It's not much different than other countries, and would is a kind of a intangible contract with the Kremlin to let the uh, Kremlin run foreign policy, so long as they feel safe, comfortable, and are prosperous. About 15%, one would say, struggle against the current government and want a liberal, Western oriented democracy. You know, that it would be within the borders prior to the expansion of Georgia in 2008, and one that is basically non militaristic. The current Russian government is telling its people Russia is um, not fighting Ukraine, but in fact, it's fighting NATO and the United States through Ukraine. And NATO is using Ukraine as a spearhead to control Russia. The rule of international law needs to be modified by taking into consideration historical events. It's not one or the other. The West has canceled all political and military events prior to 2/24/22 and only sees the horrors of war and Russian aggression. The West says that Russia's invasion into the Ukraine was provoked by Russia, but it was also initially provoked by many USA and NATO policies for over the prior 15 years that created the momentum and the impetus for Putin and his government to create a military incursion into the Ukraine. Um, Secretary of Foreign Affairs Lavrov of the Russian Federation has said the following things, which are just facts, of the ways in which Ukraine has attempted to wipe out all Russian culture and influence in the people who are Russian oriented, even though a minority inside the country. And I say wipe out, I mean kill. I just mean um, oppress them or tell them to leave. And the Ukrainian, I'm going to read a few here. The Ukrainian constitution was modified to indicate it wants to join NATO, and it's one of its avowed goals is to regain Crimea as part of the Ukraine. Um, these are the Russian language and culture has been banished. All statues of Lenin and the former Soviet Union have been taken down, and many replaced by statues of a um, former um, political and military leader from World War II named Bandera, who was responsible for actually joining the German side, fighting against the Soviets, being part of some of the Jewish Holocaust um, events, and also wiping out, killing 25 to 50,000 Poles who basically inhabited Western Ukraine, which was called Galatia. And Western Ukraine is really historically predominantly Polish. Um, the August 21st, President Zelensky made a statement that basically said if you want to be Russian, then leave the Ukraine and go to Russia, leave the country. Um, Russian media has been terminated. Can't broadcast inside the in Ukraine anymore. This is before the war started. In the educational system, Russia is being depicted as an evil force and empire, even in the elementary schools. A lot of negativity. If you have feelings of positivity towards Russia, you even if you are loyal to Ukraine, as people were in the past, you can't advance in your career. Everything will be blocked. Um, the Russian political parties are not Russian. The ones that have some sort of favorable or interest with Russia, which existed prior to all this occurring, have been banished. Um, and NATO and the USA have been extensively invited over since 2014 to train the Ukrainian army and have NATO military exercises within the borders of Ukraine near the Russian borders and have their ships, more ships in the Black Sea sailing near Crimea. And all this has been very provocative, causes fear within Russia because, you know, they can't really take on the entire NATO and the United States if it ever came to that. They understand that. And so what we need is a blend of a country that has influences both West and East. And that's how it was from 1993 to 2013. So the conflict continues on and on with no compromise in sight and continued escalation, and things could get worse and worse as the nuclear options are now being talked about. It hasn't happened, but my July 6th video, but this discussion of Russian could use tactical nuclear weapons, and I think they probably would if they were really pushed out of the Ukraine. So that's how I'll leave it today. Everybody take care of yourselves, and I'll say good night.